We arrived at Pythos right on time, finding the Black Legion and an Orc were struggling to push through a Tyranid splinter fleet of over 1 million bioships, covering the entire star system with their silence. Perfect cover for my ships, as Psychers would be unlikely to detect us. For some reason, the Orcs seemed willing to obey the Chaos Champion, hurling their rocks and cruisers in close melee with the Tyranids, giving Abaddon a clear path towards the planet. Launch the corvettes and starfighters. Battle cruisers target the Orcs only. Battleships engage the Chaos Fleet from maximum range, and pick off the escorts first. I ordered in a second, while sending engagements vectors for our heavy cruisers to fire their Nova cannons at the largest blobs of Tyranid bioships. Our fleet gently separated into 3 elements engaging different targets. Soon enough, the Orcs abandoned their march towards the planet and began turning, to engage the swift battle cruisers attacking them from behind. I tried not to use the Tesseract yet, not until I learned what the Chaos Fleet would do. Every minute, a couple of Chaos frigates or destroyers exploded under the barrage of lance batteries, while a couple of Chaos cruisers received a vortex missile each, splitting their engines apart. However, Abaddon had brought 6 battleships and 38 cruisers, plus over 500 escorts, which made his fleet the most dangerous enemy. Tyranid flyers and bioships trying to attack the Chaos forces were brutally repelled and demolished, swarms of hellfighters and bombers unleashing hell on the poor bugs and scoring thousands of kills with ease. With a new order, our cruisers changed target and primed the Nova cannons for volume saturation. "I hope you won't miss," I whispered as 30 Nova shells detonated right in the midst of the Chaos fighter swarms, obliterating thousands of demon engines and their Tyranid enemies as well. Vox message from Chaos Fleet, Captain. The Vox officer said in surprise. "Hey, it wasn't time to exchange stories, was it? Teleportarium rooms, target any open Vox channels with melter warheads," I demanded on a whim. Soon enough, a dozen capital ships had their bridges explode and burn, including a Chaos battleship. "We let our weapons speak, right?" I asked rhetorically as the Tyranids began turning to engage us as well. Now it was time to run. New vectors were sent to my fleet, and we switched course for a clearer path, while laying plasma and Nova mines in our wake. The Orc fleet conveniently intersected the Tyranid swarms chasing us, while Abaddon decided to ignore revenge for now and head towards Pythos, the jungle planet. Our course will take us there as well, on a tangential vector. Couldn't simply stay in place and duke it out with the Tyranids after all. Nor could I allow Abaddon to reach his objectives. Behind us, a series of apocalyptic explosions began as the Tyranids and Orcs stumbled into our Nova minefield, although I did cheat a bit to thin out the pursuit with 100 extra Nova mines places expertly among the largest bioblobs. "Stand and give us a good fight," the Orc war boss demanded from his damaged kill cruiser. "Orc coward boss, you did not fight the spiky hummies, so you only get spiky bugs," I replied in a teasing voice. "Always a pleasure, talking to Orcs. We not cowards, see? We're going to fight them right now. And then we come for you too, funny hummy," the war boss proclaimed in anger, turning his fleet around once more and gunning for Abaddon. Did we just gain 1,000 more ships to our side? Verlaine murmured in surprise. I just smirked inward while the crew of the Serenity grinned at the inside joke. It wasn't the first time I had turned Orcs against another enemy. Furthermore, if Abaddon had any big surprise, I wanted the Orcs to spring the trap. Soon enough they did, as another Chaos fleet arrived in the system through a warp rift, with a motherfucking Gloriana-class battleship and 30 more cruisers and 500 more escorts. "That's the Harbinger _of_ Doom, and it holds a traitor Titan Legion too," Rose explained with a cold voice, leaning on her nullbone staff for extra power. Well, the Orcs were kinda fucked now, caught between the 2 Chaos fleets and every retreat route blocked by Tyranids. "Let's help the Orcs, I think. I see 100 cruisers they're worth salvaging," I mused to myself, while directing the battleships to engage the Harbinger, while the corvettes split up in 4 groups, 3 as defense escorts and 1 as a torpedo dive force. Now the Harbinger was caught between us and the Orcs, and my battleships proved themselves, focus firing the chaos-infested Gloriana battleship which was 3 times their size. Among the 100 of torpedoes were a couple of vortex warheads, and those won us the battle, splitting the ancient warship in 3 burning fragments infested with demons. The corvettes fired their own torpedo barrage at the cruisers, and then ran away like any lance-fire ship was supposed to. Spiky Hummy tricked us. They never intended to give us free ships. Let's take theirs. The war boss deduced and began sending his own ships to board the remaining Chaos escorts in the Second Fleet, resulting in a glorious melee that emptied their cruisers of most boarding craft and troops. I only had to wait, and wait. Brother Semnai, prepare for boarding operations. We'll steal the Orc cruisers soon. I ordered on the tactical manifold. Abaddon seemed content to wait as well, no doubt worried about my fleet, as he only had 5 battleships left operational, with 1 being left behind and engulfed in Tyranids right now. He shouldn't have waited. As soon as the Chaos destroyers started being boarded by a gigantic Orc assault, led by the war boss himself, our own troops began teleporting onto the Orc cruisers and taking them over. This time, my Lamenters did not let me down, not when clad in mighty power armor and wielding powerful guns, most of them Archotech relics or combi weapons. Second waves of tech priests and servitors followed to restore those ships into our control, and one by one the Orc cruisers turned away and left the Orc fleet, forming yet another fleet on my side. In a couple of hours, my forces doubled in size, which wasn't a bad result at all. The Orc ships were crappy right now, but they could be upgraded in a few decades. I don't even have words. No wonder you have such a big fleet, Lord Pef, Villain said with an admiring voice, promising a lot of pleasure in the future. Hey. Not fair. You stole my cruisers which I stole from other Hummies. The Orc war boss protested after his own conquest run was over. There is still the Spiky Hummy, boss. He has big spiky battleships, and you want them, right? I asked in a curious tone. All right. But no backstabby again. We fight fair after we kill the spiky git. The Orc pleaded as his new fleet gathered around the remaining rocks and Orc escorts. I bet I can board them first, I teased the silly Orc. Oh no. Mks. Make us move even faster. Bring the red button here. The Orc yelled, forgetting the Vox channel open. Was I being unfair? Who cares? I was still wary of another trap from Abaddon, and thus only 2 drop cruisers entered low orbit to drop tarantula turrets in defense of the Ottokar Hive City. That still meant 80,000 autonomous turrets, which would stop any minor incursion from both Orcs or Chaos, and even small Tyrannid armies. Almost immediately, Abaddon moved his own fleet in place and began dropping his own pods, no doubt containing invasion armies of his own. And then our own attack began, Nova cannons and squadrons of torpedo corvettes decimating the Chaos fleet while Orcs assaulted from the other side with cheerful savagery and horrible losses. My battleships and battle barges took the brunt, each facing a Chaos battleship and unleashing our potent lance batteries and torpedoes. Captain, the defenders are being overrun. My XO whispered, pointing at a different holoscreen with picked images from our turrets. I sighed and admitted defeat. I would have to use the Tesseract after all. A flick of my fingers dispersed a handful of Nova mines on top of the Chaos battleships, while the Titan Legion and the Knights appeared among the defenders in a flashless teleport. 3 more drop cruisers, support the defenders, I commanded as 6 Tech Marines and their Guardian Walker turrets were teleported to the flank of the attacking Bloodthirsters and Forger Fiends. Immediately the tides turned, as the Chaos ground forces began receiving fiery judgment from the Knights and Titans. A single shot from the Emperor-class Titan obliterated the lead Khorne Berserkers, while our Warhound-class Titans murdered entire packs of Forger Fiends with their Mega Vulcan cannons, firing thousands of super-heavy bolter rounds per minute. The Forger Fiends fired back with their Ectoplasma cannons, pushing our lines back again. Watch out! There are hundreds of Chaos sorcerers on that cruiser, Rose shouted and pointed at a descending Chaos ship, heading directly for Ottokar at terminal velocity. Sadly, there was little that I could do, except teleport munitions in its path. Damn ship was enveloped in a potent warp field that prevented my Tesseract from grabbing onto it. A vortex missile managed to deviate the ship and burn out its armored prow, making it crash some 50 kilometers off into the deep jungles. I let out a deep breath I forgot I was holding, that was too close and almost obliterated my Titans. Meanwhile, the drop cruisers continued launching drop pods, as did the Chaos Fleet. Nobody was willing to back down from this fight. Then Orc rocks began crushing through the Chaos escorts and landed on the Death World as well, disgorging millions of heavily armed boys and mechs, while the Orc escorts fought desperately, or maybe joyously, with the Chaos escorts. Overall, it was kind of what I expected from this fight, and I only needed to let Abaddon make any mistake. Even a tiny one. Which is when, just above the big fight, more ships began to appear. And then even more. Everyone was ignoring the damn silence I worked so hard to produce. Oh well, I knew there would be reinforcements coming to this party. I had just forgotten that Warplus engines had spread among the Imperium forces as well, and possibly even the Warplus transceivers, even if those were new. Battlefleet Demeter was formed around a fleet carrier with about 200 system corvettes and thousands of Fury starfighters, an Emperor-class battleship and a dozen cruisers, which wasn't bad at all. The Dark Angels had brought the Rock, which served as fleet carrier for a dozen escort frigates and 2 battle barges, while the Grey Knights had a silver-painted cruiser of advanced design, looking like an Astartes strike cruiser on steroids. The history had changed, and quite radically. Commanding the Rock was not just Grandmaster Azrael, but his Primarch, Lionel Johnson, and a black-haired Inquisitor I remembered very well, Lady Avixia. Oi! The Hummies have a bigger rock. Let's loot it. The idiot war boss yelled on the Vox channel, having possibly forgot I was listening in. A plasma warhead on his bridge ended his glorious conquest dreams, then splintered his war into a dozen war bands, each taking off in different directions, leaving their boarding troops stranded, as well as the landed orcs from the asteroid rocks in the jungles. I was hoping to get more use from the orcs, but they did sufficient damage anyway. Barely 200 Chaos escorts remained intact, while the void was filled with wrecks and derelicts from the Orc and Chaos fleets. I directed some corvettes and the heavy cruisers to assist the Imperial Navy in cleaning up the easier targets, still maintaining full Auspex quiet and restricting all Voxcams to my command chair. The Imperial Navy had no such qualms, proudly declaring their undying allegiance to the Emperor and death to the traitors, which rapidly devolved into boarding actions against their fleet. I was almost ready to turn around and leave in disgust, but Abaddon might squeeze another win then. Not on my watch. Incoming Vox messages from all new ships, Captain. Multiple teleport actions detected. The tech marine manning the Auspex console announced in a single breath. Surely others could deduce the causal correlation between those two events, right? Woo-woo? Canis asked to make sure. Yes, Canis. They are idiots and give the enemy away inside their ships. I explained politely and patted Canis on his wise head. Raven snorted beside me, as more plasma warheads arrived inside the Chaos and Orc ships, pretty much as soon as a new warhead could be rolled on the teleport pads. Then a full salvo from a squadron of 50 Lancefire corvettes got through the defense flak and obliterated an entire Chaos battleship, giving my fleet an edge and allowing a lamented battle barge to focus fire the next capital ship, draining its void shields even faster. We lost 10 corvettes to retaliation before they could run away, but it was a good exchange anyway. We had 2,000 corvettes and the enemy had 4 battleships left. I saved the crew anyway, because I cared about my people. Plus we only had to buy 10 new corvettes and the fleet wouldn't even know anything was wrong. Soon enough, the Rock and the Dark Angel barges focused fire on another Chaos battleship, which diverted their commander's attention enough to sneak a pair of starfighters in and fire 2 vortex missiles, the battleship's prow and engines getting trapped in small warp rifts. I kept watch on the Grey Knights, as they were the most dangerous thing in the system right now, for good or bad. Probably the only space marines implanted with the Emperor's own gene seed, and none of them had ever turned traitor. But I doubted it was the genetics, instead suspecting Malcador's own brand of mental indoctrination that created such psycho beasts, plus the total disregard for the Codex Astartes. Probably demon host implants as well, if their successor chapter the Exorcists were any clue. After 30 or so warheads striking the Voxcasters as soon as they began transmitting, Primarch L. Johnson realized the connection and ordered his fleet to shut the hell up. It was a start, but with Augury and Auspex sensors still at maximum the teleporting boarders would keep coming. Not as easily, as the Auspex sensor were placed on the hull, but the Chaos guys had smart people too. But as the concentration of firepower proved too much, and the fourth Chaos battleship buckled and broke apart, Abaddon decided it was time to run away. I was expecting this, because Abaddon's battleship just sped away without even informing his allies of the new plan, leaving them to die to cover his retreat. Shouldn't have turned your vulnerable back at my corvettes just below. Not that the other sides were not covered, I had enough corvettes, after all. 100 torpedoes struck the battleship's engines and blew them to bits, leaving the Chaos vessel drifting and burning like a candle. And then Abaddon tried to copy Horus, dropping the void shields of the Relentless Ire, his Desolator-class battleship, and inviting boarders to battle him in an honorable duel. Gotcha now, idiot. A plasma warhead blew up his bridge, right after the traitor himself was trapped in my labyrinth, with all his precious artifacts. A dozen of his chaotic lieutenants joined Abaddon the Despoiler in my Chaos deck, arranged to stand one on top each other's shoulders like a circus troupe, with the frozen Abaddon holding them all like a champion. More Vox messages from the Imperial ships, Captain. The Vox officer announced as expected. The battle is not over. They can congratulate me when we win, which is not yet. I muttered and directed 100 corvettes to enter low orbit and bombard the invaders, while the rest of my ships were allowed to hunt in packs and demolish the remaining opposition. It took an entire day to hunt down and melt down the surviving orcs and traitors' hulls, before my fleet regrouped back in orbit over Pythos. The Imperial Navy Admiral was dead, because he invited Chaos Terminators on board his Emperor-class battleship, the Revenge, and the Dark Angels and the Grey Knights had to battle hard to recover the ship. It didn't matter anyway. Another well-connected officer will be promoted in his place, and nothing of importance was lost. Too bad about the Navy crew who saw the Grey Knights, as they will be killed to keep the secret. Everyone leave the bridge. All ships cover your windows as they warp. No point getting executed for seeing funny Imperials. I ordered and pointed to Canis as well. The Space Wolf threw me a pitiful glance and ran out. Rose waited until the bridge door closed, and then leaned over to kiss my cheek. A magnificent victory, my love. But you know, that Primarch I sense on the rock will take the glory. Didn't bother me one bit. I lost 10 ships, it kinda hurts. I muttered instead. Verlaine kissed my other cheek, and then sat in the Vox officer seat. Your Lady Avixia seems eager to meet you, dear Peth. The Ordo Xenos Inquisitor explained while overriding the security controls and establishing a picked link with the rock. This is Inquisitor Rameus. Identify yourself. The woman demanded in a stern voice. This is Primarch Il Johnson. Explain why you blew up the last battleship. The man demanded in powerful voice. I tapped into the Vox channel as well. Well met, Primarch. I am Pef Lancefire, Chapter Master of the Lamenters Chapter and a rogue trader too. Any reason why any Astartes or rogue trader should not blow up Chaos warships? I asked in a teasing voice. The Primarch glared at me for a few seconds. There were precious relics on board. Plus some traitors I wanted to be captured. I ignored his feeble excuse and smiled genially. Of course, Lord Il Johnson. I do have some important prisoners and their artifacts. I'm certain we can trade and both obtain what we want. Lady Avixia, always a pleasure to meet an Ordo Malleus Inquisitor that has not been corrupted, yet, I declared with a wry smirk, which didn't please Avixia too much, as she gritted her teeth with a red face. With a mental flick I closed the connection and began sending landers to recover my troops and tarantula turrets. My job had been finished rather satisfactory, although 8 Knights and 3 Titans were damaged, plus a third of the tarantula turrets and guardians had been destroyed. I intended to make the Imperium pay for my losses anyway. Incoming transmission from the Silver Cruiser. Wanna chat with the Grey Knights? Verlaine asked in a professional tone. They are merely mindless automatons, no point in talking with them. I answered with a level voice, while ordering my fleet to interpose aggressively and protect our lander craft. 20 more attempts at Vox transmissions. Verlaine muttered as my ships formed a barrier of armor and lance batteries around the stream of landers. Just ignore them, and they'll go away. Or perhaps shoot first, so I can blow them up in self-defense, I said in a careless voice. It wouldn't come to that with a Primarch watching, but better make sure. And you wouldn't even blink doing that, would you? Rose asked, curious. Why would I blink, my dear? I have family on Pythos that I intend to protect and recover. Those demon host space marines mean nothing to me. Mindless zombies, all of them. I grumbled as I leaned into my command chair. A new communique arrived from the rock, and that I allowed through. Lord Lancefire, the Grey Knights demand that no locals be allowed on your landers. Vital to the security of the Imperium. Inquisitor Danica announced, holding out her rosette to confirm the order. A pity then. Nearly 50 million people. Well, if they were going to burn them anyway, I could pillage the place. I nodded at the holoscreen and closed my eyes. There were thousands of small settlements dotting the high mountains, which became suddenly empty as their population was transferred into my Tesseract labyrinth. Nearly 40 million people that never boarded a lander, as ordered. Couldn't do anything for those poor souls in Hive City Otakar, which would be closely monitored to prevent escapees, but I could steal 1,000 tons of munitions and weapons from their sealed armories. The Imperium would pay for my losses double. My duty here is over then, I announced with a calm voice, and turned off the Vox channel. The Tyranids would not wait after all, and were already massing for great meal on the jungle world. Without replying to more transmissions, I loaded the Titans and Knights back in the landing bays and urged my fleet away, clearing an escape path with our Nova cannons and concentrated lance battery fire. The Imperial Navy didn't stick around either, following my bigger fleet to safety. Just before we departed the gravity well of the sun, the jungle world Pythos was engulfed in the familiar flames of an incendiary exterminatus torpedo, only an hour after the Tyranids began landing their spore pods. A bit too soon in my opinion, but good enough. The lead Tyranid spore pods did contain the broodlords and tyrants, and losing them would weaken the Tyranid splinter fleet greatly. This would also leave the bioships stranded here, hibernating to conserve energy while maintaining a thick shadow in the warp around the ruined Pythos. The demon cache under Otakar would be sealed by molted lava and covered in warp disrupting silence, while the Chaos Forces lost their best leader and much of the Black Legion fleet, probably more than half. Meanwhile my own collection grew, and I had things to trade now, valuable things. The captured Orc cruisers were either towed behind or left to journey on their own, 60 of them in better shape grouped in squads of 3 and sent towards 20 different Forge worlds to be repaired and upgraded. As for the rest, 35 cruisers that had been damaged were towed behind my fleet back to Forge Machine, to be converted into more drop cruisers. I had Forge Machine working on restoring the teleport STC constructor and begin mass-producing drop pods with teleport beacons, which would allow rapid recovery of our turrets in the future. It would take decades anyway, because research takes time, and much longer times with tech priests. And constructing the devices wouldn't be fast either. After a week inside the Pharos, and scanning the nearby star systems attentively, I departed with the newly arrived guard regiments and 1 million tech priests and acolytes to settle 50 more planets, using the Katakans to establish security and the tech priests to construct the infrastructure and defenses, plus mines and railroads and dozens of small cities on each world. This also meant some orbital forts and a warpless transceiver network were needed, linking Forge Machine with the new domain real-time. Advanced Explorer fleets were sent to lay FT-Air communication routes to Forge Antax and Forge Triplex FAL, while streams of immigrants and Imperial regiments arrived monthly to be distributed into the colonies. It took 5 years until the network was complete, and by this time the first underground hive cities had begun being built as well, sponsored by increased promethium and coal mining industry on Natale, as well as the rich mineral deposits of radium and liberation. The Ultima Segmentum was eerily quiet in the meantime, if we accept the loud orcs and occasional Necrons waking up. 1 trillion orcs were gathering to besiege Armageddon, riding on asteroids and space hulks and various captured ships. It wasn't something a single Astartes chapter could deal with, but the Imperium had 3 Primarchs now. Surely one of them could take care of the orcs. What do I need? I mused out loud, and glanced at Zohulash for advice. You need ships, Pef Lancefire. Much stronger ships too, if you want to fight the Tyranids. The Catan said in a cold voice. I looked all over, mighty Zohulash. Unless I dive into the maelstrom to fight Corsair and Renegades, there's only pirate destroyers and frigates, maybe a few light cruisers. Nothing really interesting. I replied with a pained sigh. Those targets were still good, and I had Lamenta snatching raids sent all over the eastern fringe to board pirate hideouts and recover more escorts, but even hundreds of destroyers wouldn't be of real use, except as defense fleets for the Lance-fire domain. The escorts were too small to carry powerful Lance batteries, and they also needed warp drives which made them a liability for long deployments. There is the warp gate to the Expanse, and there are many space hulks not yet claimed. Plus, the Antian sector. The Catan Shard advised me with a curious voice. What's in that sector? I wondered while searching the galactic map. One of those Blackstone fortresses, serving as a base for a demon prince. Also 1,000 renegade navy and pirate vessels, including 100 cruisers and 3 battleships. Zorhulash explained with a knowing voice. Well, that was a tempting target indeed. Now that I had the activation artifacts from Abaddon, a Blackstone fortress would be a powerful weapon. And the Blackstone itself would not be corrupted by chaos. I nodded gratefully, and retrieved 2 more Exterminatus torpedoes. One for Kokkolos, a demon world beyond the Maelstrom that had not been in the Pharos range till now, and the newly awakened Necron world of Nagatha, here in my backyard. Cyclonic torpedoes both, because I wanted to send a powerful message. Then I returned to my apartment, to enjoy my sweet blonde Amberly. Plus having sex on a floating mattress was special and annoyed Raffen as well. Just like that, yes, oh God, Amberly shouted as we bounced off the ceiling. Perhaps I shouldn't have given her alpha-level powers, whatever. Hopefully this child will be another blank. Lately the numbers of blank children had grown per year, reaching 50. This probably matched some logarithmic chart somewhere keeping track of my growth in soul powers. Very possible, as even my children were having a substantial increase in blank births, especially my daughters when paired with natural blanks. This also annoyed their Katakan husbands, but it was their fault for not being Slimearbo. That guy had everything right. Lady Rose requests sentry, my lord. Perhaps you should climb down? My bodyguard advised me with a wry voice. Let her wait, I want more. Amberly muttered, holding me tight in her arms. I didn't mind her love, but Rose had important news if she barged in uninvited. Tomorrow, my love. Now go rest, I whispered in her neck, and squeezed her breasts as a reward. She vanished from under me and let me fall, just as Rose entered the room and caught the mattress with telekinesis. That's an interesting trick you had Amberly perform. Must work on the landing though. The raven-haired inquisitor commented with a smirk, and gently set me down to be examined as meat market. Wait outside, Raven. I sent him on the manifold, just as Rose sat beside me and held a data slate. Infosight Calixa sent word. There is silent vigil on Alax, with 1,000 silent sisters, and their dependents. Rose explained as the galactic map opened to pinpoint a northern galactic world at the edge of the Imperium. Let me guess, they use rogue traders for supplies. I deduced with my genius brain. I'll need a pair of sisters and a battle cruiser to recruit that rogue trader and reach Ilax. I think Alana and Aaliyah would work best. The Inquisitor whispered while undressing herself for a final round. This was a great find indeed. Rose deserved a big reward, and Calixa as well when I caught up with her somewhere. I left Rose filled with liquid love and probably pregnant again, and went to check on my Titan Legion. Luckily, the Blessed Auto Simulacra self-repair device worked just fine and the damaged Titans were restored to duty. Which was great, because they will be needed, just like my Knights and the Leviathans. Day was round and rosy with our 4th child, overseeing the training of the Princeps and the Titan crews from her desk. My beloved wife, you look radiant today, I murmured and stole a kiss. And you stink of sex and other women. And not even those 3 new Princeps pilots that arrived from Lucius and Greer. My wife bit my lip in revenge and complained loudly. I should bed those 3, before I left. More Titan pilots would be nice. I wanted to let them feel at home first, dear Day. But if you insist, I can make time in my busy schedule, for 3 more women. I explained teasingly and patted her round belly. A tiny kick hit my palm weakly, so not even the kid inside liked me right now. Busy schedule? A month spent in bed is busy schedule? When are you going on crusade again, eh? The Titan piloting wife chided me and poked my chest, sounding a bit annoyed. I kissed her for a long minute, then caressed her rosy face while Day struggled to catch her breath. Very soon, my love. Probably 2 weeks, if nothing goes wrong until then. I won't take the Scout Titans though. They need atomantic reactors and shields to avoid another debacle, like on Phytos, I said in a level voice, and began walking out. Don't forget about the new girls, Day yelled after me, just before I walked out. Rafen grinned at me and patted my shoulder. That's a great wife you found, my lord. Urging you to bed other women, you are too lucky. I nodded wisely, and headed for the mess hall, and sat down to eat with the 3 new arrivals. Lord Lancefire, is it our turn today? A pixie-cut lady with brown hair and a deep tan asked, a bit hopeful, while poking at her grey slop of food with disgust. Sure, the Mechonicus food gave them everything their bodies needed, vitamins and amino acids and all that. But it looked and smelled horribly. I think we first visit my ship and eat a real grok steak, drink some expensive IX wine and chat a little. Nobody is forced to join my family, pretty ladies, I answered after scowling in disgust at the crappy food. It was worse than Nutri-Gruel, and those were liquid combat rations. You had me at real steak, my lord. Plus, you're so cute, another woman announced, tugging at her ponytail to let curly black hair fall on her shoulders, while she pushed her magnificent chest out, very proudly. Lady Sierra Lugimni was certainly the most beautiful pilot I knew, and among top 3 of all my women. Right beside Rose and Serena. Proof of carefully selected genes, but I didn't mind that at all. He talked to me first. The pixie girl muttered and glanced at me under her eyelashes, as if trying to provoke me. All right then, I'll bed you first, Pixie. I like real steak too. The third girl from Grya whispered shyly, while her cheeks became bright red with embarrassment. She had platinum hair cut in a bob, and green eyes, which worked perfectly with her white skin. Probably liked beefy muscles as well, if I was not mistaken. If it was really necessary, I had other tools to convince the Titan pilots to bear me blank children, but so far it hasn't been the case. Perhaps having sanguineous genes and an angelic face was good for something today. I'll have to visit Fabricator Gemina soon and thank her very deeply for the new pilots, which were possibly not easy to obtain. She was only half cyborg anyway, and her face was quite natural. As for the metal tentacles, one had to bear it and learn to ignore minor problems. Trade is war, war is trade. Either way, the House of Macau profits. Lady Sun Li. Sun Li sat on her light cruiser's bridge, the Nahoncha, while considering the news she had just received from her informants on Scintilla. What do you say, Voidmaster Shin? There is opportunity in war. The woman asked with a frown. All rogue traders had to be brave, and bold, and most of all lucky. Perhaps not as lucky as the fabled Pef Lancefire, the rogue trader in the distant fringe with his own Astartes chapter, but they do needed luck to survive and prosper. And House Macau had 100,000 people depending on her to prosper. There are rumors of demon princes, Captain. Names like Corruptus and Lilindo have reached my ear, and I had to silence those fools before they spread the rumors even further. The Inquisition will surely be involved, and we don't want them to visit us again. The man argued with a shiver. Chaos again. Why couldn't it be Orcs or Eldar? At least you could sell the loot for fortunes. Either way, standing aside was not profitable, in riches or reputation. We make for Forge World Telios V then. I think I figured out how Lancefire does it, aiding Forge Worlds for free ships. Do we have enough Voidsmen to capture a cruiser? Sun Li asked, a bit hopeful. Her master-at-arms shook his head over the holotable. A very small cruiser, perhaps. Best if we try for a frigate. And only if we use that toxic gas, which we promised to have destroyed. The man muttered in disgust, and scratched his bionic arm. The gas would kill everyone on board, that was true. And lose her half of the cleanup crew, as the gas would eat through void suits and flesh with equal hunger. Maybe not then. If only we had teleporters, she whispered in defeat. I'll prepare the boarding boats and double the melter charges, Captain. We can send servitors with plast steel shields first, and then our voidsmen and our house guards. Expected casualties are only at 48% for a pirate frigate and 27% for a destroyer. Her master-at-arms provided after consulting the Savant implant. Sun Li glanced at their resident tech priest, a runaway renegade, but very useful anyway. Archmagos Omnifax, any chance for another miracle weapon? The guy was obviously not even a Magus, but she would use whatever name he gave without complaints. "I do, Captain. There are a dozen directional mines being prepared in the manufactorum. Place them against a solid shield, and the hallways in front will be filled with shrapnel and bouncing balls of steel. The servitors might not survive the recoil though," the Herotech tech priest explained while holding a tentacle out and projecting a red hologram with his new weapon. "And for this?" she asked in a tired voice. "A dozen test subjects, and 50,000 thrones. Surely the costs will be recovered swiftly once you conquer and sell a pirate vessel, right, Captain?" Sun Li examined the proposed weapon with a frown. It was simple and effective though. "Perhaps. We will need 100 of these claymore directional mines Archmagos Omnifax. A ship has many hallways, correct?" she asked in a stern tone. "Not that it mattered with the Mechonicus. Then you will provide me a ton of agricultural fertilizer and 100,000 thrones. Plus the steel. I promise not to chop away at the ship's walls anymore," the tech priest demanded and waved two tentacles for some obscure reason. Sun Li nodded. "Agreed. Now start working on these weapons, and make sure they don't explode prematurely, again. I'll go and select the test subjects from the lower decks, Captain. And please give the navigator his dose, he is clawing at the armored door already." Voidmaster Shin muttered and walked away to gather voidsmen for the perilous descent into the lower decks. Sun_Li sighed, and checked the snuff box. Only 3 doses were left, and after that, she will need a new navigator, as the chances of finding a Strixie's caravan were astronomical, more so when heading into a war zone. Betting everything on their next conquest was not something she liked, but there weren't other choices. The navigator was already a mess of tentacles and claws, and only the snuff drug kept him stable enough for another warp jump. "We really need a cruiser with warpless drives," her master-at-arms mused thoughtfully. "Like that battle cruiser with the Psyker Inquisitor?" "Right. Perhaps we should even take the offer from that blonde assassin," Sun Li said in a dismissive voice. "An alliance wouldn't be so bad, Captain. And you need a husband anyway," the man murmured softly. "Get out. I make my own luck," Sun Li yelled and smashed the holotable for emphasis. Not too hard though, as the bloody thing was really expensive. Sure, a seat at the high table on Terra for rogue traders was attractive, but it wasn't worth losing her freedom. Plus, that Katakan major scared her. Just looking at him made her want to smack his face, with a hammer most likely. Those dead eyes, and grim smile. Like burning into your soul, and seeing every secret. Soon enough, the Nihonshu was prepared and jumped into the warp, while the navigator stopped screaming for a time. 3 weeks at most. The 3 Cobra destroyers flanked the cruiser, although the third one will need a refit at the Forged World and possibly a new fusion generatorium, as this one was leaking badly and irradiating the crew. It never got the chance, as the nexus point was blockaded by a gigantic fort-made black matter, surrounded by 1,000 ships of every kind. "Emergency turn, dive and engage plasma engines to full," she ordered as the third Cobra split in 2 and blew up in a cataclysmic explosion that luckily caught 20 boarding shuttles and a dozen Chaos starfighters in the radius. The gunners started firing, plasma cannons and lance batteries striking a couple of bombers and clearing a path for the Forged World. They were still trapped, but surely the fabricator will allow repairs in exchange for aid. "Captain, the navigator is purging quarters now," her Voidmaster yelled and pointed at the holoscreen, where the picked camera in the navigator quarters caught the last moment before the creature bloomed into a flesh tree made of skulls and fangs. A thin spray of face iron dust hit the creature and made it retreat, while the explosive bolts blew out the armor panels and ejected the demon into space. "Focused fire on the skull tree," Sun Li commanded, trying to ignore the strangeness of the order. A dozen cruiser-sized weapons hit the creature until it burst into purple fire and vanished. "We're going to need a new navigator," she murmured in dismay. It didn't matter if the whole bridge crew heard it, did it? "And a new navigator deck," the Vox officer added smartly. "Perhaps washing that deck a dozen times will teach the moron some respect. When combat was over, of course." "Sensors, any pursuit?" she asked anxiously. "No, Captain. These guys seem content to simply pillage whatever ships jump in. And the big thing is a Blackstone fortress, Captain. the Auspex girl said in a polite tone. There was a good officer in the making there. One day, the girl might become a captain, if they lived that long. They were almost halfway to the forge, when a new fleet jumped right beside them, bypassing the blockade. Sun Li checked the identifying sigils 3 times. Bloody Pef Lancefire. Captain Sun Li, be so kind and turn off all active Auspex and Vox comms. It would be a shame if such a pretty lady gets butchered by teleporting traitors. A voice spoke in her head, seeming amused for some reason. She gritted her teeth and did as ordered. The man phrased it mildly, but there was real danger too. Archmagos Omnifax, could the traitors ride back our Auspex signals and teleport right here? She asked the resident tech priest. The cyborg froze for a minute, possibly thinking very hard. It sounds possible, if they have powerful cogitators or Piscas. And would a Chaos fleet with 1,000 ships have all that? Sun Li asked ironically. I'll start working on restricting all active emissions, Captain. Visibility will decrease significantly. The tech priest explained and began chanting at his Mechonicus console, then spraying oil and scented incense. Helm, turn us around. We'll cover Lord Lancefire while he battles. She began saying when the sky exploded into thousands of gigantic explosions centered on that black fortress. A minute later, when the armored windows lost the black tint, barely 100 burning wrecks remained, while Lancefire corvettes sped ahead to push the wrecks into the sun. Nova cannons are great, eh? And you need a new navigator, Lady Sun Li. The smug voice of Pef Lancefire sounded from the Voxcaster. She slumped in her command chair, trying to make sense of what she saw. Sure, those Chaos guys were kinda clumped up around the jump nexus, and the fortress was a target nobody could miss, but even so, it would take unbelievable luck to hit every shot. 1,000 enemies, gone just like that. He's so cool. I wonder if we can visit his ship. The Auspex girl murmured in a mesmerized voice. Sun Li sighed and closed her eyes in defeat. Some people had all the luck. While Forge World Telos V wasn't a big forge, they did have dockyards and repair facilities, so it was easy enough to include Lady Sun Li in my deals with the fabricator. As for navigators, I did have a stock of them in my labyrinth, and even a few not outwardly corrupted. But my aid wasn't free or cheap. You ask too much, Lord Lancefire. If you need House Markow votes, then yes. Me or my heirs will support your house for a High Lord seat, in perpetuity. Even a single navigator would be worth it. Another one held in stasis as backup is a phenomenal luxury. Lady Sun Li explained over the table. I propose a test then. Lend me your Lieutenant Maya, the Auspex officer. My son Tiberius needs a wife, for 5 years, I said in a calm voice. The rogue trader measured me with caution. Why for 5 years, what happens afterward? I shrugged and sipped the wine, which was quite good. After that, Tiberius has to join the Lamenters, become a space marine. His new body will not allow marital relations. And the children? She asked brutally. Blank boys will be sent to me, at the age of 10. Your house can keep the girls, I declared in a level voice. She nodded thoughtfully, considering various scenarios in her mind. Blank girls would be valuable, perhaps more than boys. An entire dynasty could be born, immune to chaos. I smiled genially. Most of my daughters are ship captains now. Being blank almost guarantees the promotion, in my house. Sun Li sighed and gulped her wine. You must have 1,000 concubines then. My fleet will remain here to resupply for a week, before we depart on anti-piracy raids and then head for Footfall. Might I tempt you to join me for the first part? You may also bring your house guards, just in case there is boarding to be done. I proposed in a gentle voice. Only me and the troops, huh? How will we get back? The rogue trader asked with a frown. I started with a light cruiser too, you know? Everything I have now, I took it with strength or guile. Sometimes using enemies to my own needs, like the raid on Camorra or the Pandrax campaign, where I captured 105 orc cruisers for my dynasty, while the stupid orcs were busy boarding Abaddon's ships. Then we blew them all up and came home, much richer. I explained in a teasing voice. She sobbed and poured herself more wine. Teleporting Astartes are cheats. I could do it too, if I had teleporters. Prove it then, Lady's son. There are 55 teleport rooms in my fleet. You may use 5 teleportariums and keep whatever pirate ship you conquer, I demanded while drinking more wine. Damn lucky bastard, I can do it too. The woman muttered half drunk. Much later, I allowed Lady Sun to obtain a heavy cruiser for her house, even though it cost her half her troops. She would have failed, unless I vanished most of the opposition, but I did like her. And I captured 2 battleships and 19 cruisers anyway. The new ships needed warpless engines, so I sent them with a skeleton crew to forge Lucius, which was the only big forge in my list, in this segmentum obscurus. I would keep a dozen cruisers and the battleships, and donate the rest to forge Lucius for their work. Seemed a fair deal to me, and I even included Lady Sun in the deal. And that sealed our alliance, in my bed. You're too pretty and too lucky, damn you. Lady Sun murmured as she rested on my chest and calmed her breath. I was injected with the blood of Sanguinius, my dear. At least you can be certain our children will be pretty too. Maybe even blanks. I answered while fondling her tired body. No more. I can't do it again, not today. She complained and slapped my hand away. There is one last ritual you'll need to perform, Lady's son. And it's perfect that you're already naked. I announced and moved her in my training room, with a dozen orcs and a chrono sword stabbed into the floor. There was no such ritual, but she was a very good sword user. Took her less than a minute to chop down the confused orcs, and then reappear in the shower room. What stupid ritual is this? Naked against a dozen orcs? And what was that sword? She yelled from the shower while rinsing off the blood and gore. I waited until she emerged wet and angry from the hot shower. My sons and I, we all train like this, clearing entire space hulks with only a sword and no armor. Oh Pef, she whispered and sat down to hug me. Never fight a space marine in melee, my love. You're good, but 100 years too slow. And many traitors are millennia old. I advised her while conquering her body again. By next month we parted ways, me and my fleet towards the Coronis_Expanse and the big prize of the Light of Terror, while Lady Sun had people to bury and mourn. Even victory was bitter in 40k, although she gained much more than she knew. And her promise of support in perpetuity? She will live to uphold it now. There are many words that can describe Footfall. A giant mountain sculpted in the form of the Emperor of Mankind, with field made of 1,000 asteroids around it, all tied with chains and bridges. A port into the expanse, home to many rogue traders or free captains, the unfortunate ones without a warrant of trade. A hive of scum and slavery, chaos cults and heretics of 1,000 kinds, xenos and mutants, psychers and tech priests, many of them renegades. But in my eyes, it was perfect. An immense looting ground of exotic weapons, rare aliens and even STC patterns, and a sandbox for my labyrinth. They never knew what hit them, especially when orcs appeared in the millions in a surprise war and forced me to restore order, using armed sentinels as foot soldiers, knights and leviathans and even a Reaver Titan for shock and awe. The Mechanicus Alter Templum Calixis X-17 was looted by the marauding orcs of everything of value, especially extensive research into Xenos weaponry and vaults of invaluable samples and Mechanicus relics, while the corrupt administrator was defenestrated by an unknown party and splattered at the feet of the Emperor's statue. A dozen mini-storeroom churches and cathedrals were savagely looted as well, and nearly 30 priceless relics were lost forever, while 1,000 fat priests and bishops emptied their bellies, literally. Some even had silver throne coins mingled inside their dripping intestines. By the time my forces were able to restore order, 90% of the locals were dead, excluding the freed slaves and the manufactorum's workers, plus the dockyard guys. I blamed the Dark Eldar for this debacle, although only 1,000 were actually present. I made sure to produce 10 times more, and had them burned on huge pyres along with all the other dead. It made the survivors very happy for some reason. The dockyard's foreman was elected to rule the settlement by the time my lamenters and knights withdrew, although the occupation lasted 2 months, because my tech priests had to repair pretty much all the damaged buildings and gravity generators, plus install surveillance networks and train 2 of my Emperor's blades how to use it properly, plus the teleport pads took time to assemble. It wouldn't last very long, the imposed order. I was quite aware of this. But newcomers will be easy enough to log and watch, their deals and ships monitored and reported to the appropriate Imperium's organization. As for the ships already present on Footfall, I generously donated them to a couple of nearby Forge worlds, only keeping a Grand Cruiser in nearly perfect condition, with a warrant of trade in the vault. It seemed the former owner was one Caligos_Winterscale, now deceased. He named my daughter Fenona as his heir for some strange reason, and she reluctantly accepted his dying wish. Thank you, Daddy. Did I tell you how much I love you, lately? Even if you had me married to that ugly Winterscale, for an entire minute, Fenona exclaimed as I handed her the warrant and kissed my cheek very reluctantly. Lady Winterscale, may I expect your support for the position of High Lord of Terror? I asked instead. You can bet a throne on that, Lord Lancefire. Now, I just need to get my ship some real engines and my own regiments. May I count on your aid, in this matter? She demanded coyly. Couldn't say no to my own beloved daughter, could I? Now, where should I send her? I can only recommend you head towards Forge Shenlong. There are some presents in the ship vaults, plus the fabricator is a good friend of mine. We fought together once and even killed a traitor Primarch. I answered after thinking for an entire minute. The new rogue trader nodded politely, and ran away to her Katakan husband waiting outside, while jumping over the corpse of her former husband. Raffen grinned at me as the armored door closed. Always a pleasure to see you work, my lord. One day we will reach Terra itself, he admitted with a happy and hopeful voice. I just shook my head. Not until Robute takes the sword, my friend. The Hexarchy is forming already, and I don't want my family as their target. I see. That would be a problem, especially the Ecclesiarchy. He mused wisely. The Tyranids and the Necrons are still the bigger problems, Astartes. I need something powerful to stop them, relics from our ancestors. For starters, a Gloriana battleship for my chapter. I explained in a gentle voice. And then a big gun for that ship, something that could shatter worlds, just like Abaddon had.